When I got sober, one of the first things I did was get a dog. And I'll tell you what, man, like that dog, it gave me a mission and it gave me something to focus on other than myself. I mean, that dog literally saved my life.
We domesticated dogs before we domesticated wheat.
Right.
20,000 years ago or more. Agriculture's 10,000 years. So what does that mean? So if we've been living with dogs for 500 generations, we got to think about what is the impact.
Live in the moment. This is such a good lesson from dogs. They live in the here and now.
Welcome to 2%. I'm your host, Michael Easter, and today's episode is all about dogs, which is why I have my best buddy, Duke, with me right here. So Duke is a 8-month-old German short hair pointer. He hangs out with me all day. He goes with me everywhere. I have owned dogs my entire life, and I am an absolute and utter dog person. Love dogs. So first off, we are going to talk to Sam Alaimo. Sam is a Navy SEAL who is also a big dog fanatic. And what's interesting about Sam is he writes a lot at his Substack called What Then? About the philosophy of dogs and how dogs can help us become better humans and give us a philosophy of living day to day. After that, we're going to talk to Dr. Nancy G. She is a researcher who studies the physical and mental health benefits of dog ownership. So she's going to get into all the details about why owning a dog is really, really good for you. So with all that said, we're going to get into the episode. We're going to let Duke go off and chase a squirrel or whatever he's going to do after this. We got a good episode though, so let's get into it. All right, now we're going to bring on Sam Alaimo. Sam Alaimo is a dog lover, first and foremost. He is a former Navy SEAL, and then he got his master's at Columbia, and he now runs the What Then Substack, which is one of my favorite reads. And on his What Then Substack, he writes a lot about the philosophy of having a dog and what we all can learn about living better from dogs. So let's bring him on now. Sam, thanks for coming on the show.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Michael.
Well, we're here to talk dogs, so we obviously got to start with your priors. You have a dog. What's his name? Is it a him?
It's a him, and it's Carson. He's a mutt. We have no idea what he is. We just know he's like ridiculously good looking. His chiseled jaw, the shape, the colors, the eyes, the compact paws, everything about him.
Awesome. How big?
62 pounds.
Oh, that's a big guy. I've seen photos of him on your Substack. I was thinking you were going to say like 45, 50?
No, he's lean. He's muscle. He gets a lot of rocking, a lot of walking.
Awesome. When did you get him?
So my girlfriend actually had him early, and he and I first met in 2018. So we've been together for a while now.
Awesome. That's rad. Did you have dogs growing up?
Yeah, I grew up. We had a sheepdog. We had an Australian Shepherd dog. And then when I was, I guess, starting from middle school, we had Shih Tzus. And like to this day, they're still my favorite dog breed.
Shih Tzus?
Yeah.
They're actually very sweet. You see, I feel like people can see them and they kind of like, what is this foo-foo thing? But they're actually awesome.
Yeah, especially when they start yapping. You're like, what are you doing? But then you realize the size of the soul of a Shih Tzu. So they're tiny. They don't know how small they are. Like for how small they are literally bare knuckle fighters. They will take on any dog 10 times the size and they don't care. They will throw down. So they're the most spirited dogs. They have the most personality of any dog I've ever seen. I love them.
My best friend when I was a kid growing up in Utah, he had a Shih Tzu. Its name was Puddles. I'm going to let you take a single guess why its name was Puddles. But this dog they lived on this relatively busy road. It was like a 30-mile-an-hour road. And this dog would chase cars and just yap at them and bite their tires. I think it got hit 5 or 6 times. And then finally on the 7th, it all ended. But the dog was like 13 on that final one. I mean, this dog was just badass.
That's relentless. You can't train that. That's by nature. The Shih Tzu is that way.
Yeah. This is my road, bitch. Get off it. Awesome. All right. So you're a former SEAL.
Correct.
When did you join? How old were you?
I was 19, and I wanted to be a SEAL since I was 14. So that was like my 5-year preparation before I actually got to sign the paper and make it happen. Why
at 14 did you want to become a SEAL? What was it about that?
I don't know. Early in life, I had a sort of awakening or hammer strike, however you want to refer to it, where I think I realized at a young age how short life can be. And I felt even at 14 like I was on a trajectory that I didn't exactly author myself. And I realized I had a choice right now. If you can question everything to the point where you have no idea what the point of life is at 14, it means you have the innate ability to build it. If you could break it down, you can build it up. And I said, okay, what's the most difficult thing I can do that would get my mind and my body engaged? So I did at that time, like a primitive Google search. And I came up with Navy SEALs. I didn't know anybody in the military, knew nothing about them. I just said, that's it. And from that day forward, every single day, push-ups, reading, swimming, running, rucking every day. And that was how I built my life.
That's awesome. The reading part is interesting. What prompted the reading thing? Because I think most people would see SEALs and then they do that initial Google and then they click images and it's a photo selection or something. So why the reading?
I think you'll find, I think a lot of the guys,
yeah.
There's a particular draw to communities like that where it's not just, hey, I like to lift weights and drink beer. It is the whole human effect. It's how do you excel, not just physiologically, but psychologically? How do you excel emotionally? How do you excel intellectually? Even the enlisted community and the SEAL teams, more than half have bachelor's degrees. That's not normal. So you get a 4-year degree and then you enlist in the military, become a SEAL. It's trying to max out that full spectrum of the human experience.
Do you feel like that feature of being, I'll use the word intellectual, gets selected for in the process of selection, where it's if someone who has read a lot, thought a lot, can maybe dissociate more with the physical suffering that happens in the selection process and not get basically tossed out by it, or what?
That's a good question. Intellectual was the best word I picked off the cuff. It may not be the best word overall. There's a difference between the intellectualism of multiple Ivy League degrees and the intellectualism of being acutely aware of your presence in reality, of the working of your mind, of your assumptions about your capacity to handle an extremely difficult situation, about how you read the person you're in a fire team with, about how you read the enemy, about how you read intelligence. And that is a super mindfully engaged, attuned, whatever you want to call it, sort of intellectualism that is 100% selected for deliberately. It just so happens that the people who have that capacity are also drawn to the world of books, the world of ideas, and not so much schooling as they are education. Schooling has often gone awry, but education almost never goes wrong, and they generally lean that direction.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you did tours in Afghanistan, right?
I did a couple tours, yeah.
How long were you over there?
I was there 2010, 11, 12, and 13.
Okay. And a lot of these places you were kind of in the middle of nowhere. These are like pre-state places.
Straight up pre-state. And that's where kind of a lot of my writing originated. It was exposure to a legitimate pre-state. Where I was, they didn't think of themselves as Afghani. They thought of themselves as part of their village. Yeah. And the villages there were maybe 50 people. And then you would have this mountainous tribal land, and the mountains are like beautifully crisscrossed by river valleys. So the mountains are like these stark brown, reddish rock. And then in the middle, in these river valleys, is a thin, muddy river and this lush green zone. Almond, pomegranate, rice, ancient crops, beautiful little mud pathways going in and out of them that crisscross. And the people live in that place with no electricity. There's no plumbing. Most of them don't have vehicles. None of the roads are paved. There's no cell phones. There's no cell coverage. It is literally as pre-state as it gets. If Alexander the Great had set foot in that river valley, he would say, wow, nothing changed. It was a mind-blowing experience and probably the most beautiful place I've ever seen in my life, because you can smell the air that there was no pollution. And at night, there was no light pollution. So the Milky Way, you could literally reach out and like grab the Milky Way. Like every color of red and yellow and white. It was, I called it like Middle Earth. Like it reminded me of some fantasy land that existed 20,000 years ago.
All right. So you get out of the SEALs and then you went to business school at Columbia pretty quickly, right?
Yeah. So to make that happen, since I enlisted when I was 19, I had to do my degree online. So I did that while I was in. You could do it if you don't sleep for 4 years and work on the weekends. So I got my undergrad degree online while I was in. And then with about a year left, I had to decide, am I going to stay the military path or am I going to get out? So I had the opportunity to go to a different unit in the SEAL teams or go to Columbia to get my master's. And, my tours were very kinetic. I think I checked every box I wanted to check, plus many I didn't want to. Mm-hmm. And then it was time to move on for a new adventure. And that was it.
Interesting. So you go from the world that is one kinetic and two like Middle Earth into Manhattan. What was that transition like? Not to mention you're in a classroom.
Yeah, it was almost enough to break me. Like I could admit that now. And at the time, it was even harder, not just due to the transition and that shift between two different worlds, but I was also dealing with like health stuff. I didn't realize it took me a few years to figure that out, but it was autoimmune problems, which I'm still deal with today. And it's now kind of shaped my life into a very narrow channel. And I made the mistake of attributing much of the psychological and existential torment I was going through to mental weakness as opposed to a physiological problem. So I made it worse. I like literally cascaded it. And just that learning experience itself was, yeah, it was good. It was eye-opening.
I'm sure. How soon was it that you ended up getting a dog?
It was a while. So Carson was probably the first one I had since going to the military. But through the military, my family dog, Gertie, Shih Tzu, she was sort of like my anchor. Yeah. And it's difficult to describe. You go, there's a great ethnography on the Marine Jaegers, the Norwegian Navy SEALs. I got to work with a couple of guys who were really good dudes. And the author embedded herself with the Marine Jaegers and really summed up that world beautifully. She said Marine Jaegers and other soft or combat units, they live on the margin. And on the margin is everything civilization doesn't want to talk about or see. That's the violence. That's the death, the dying, the killing, the suffering, the training for war, extremely hyper-masculine environment, on all the time, high risk. And when you experience that environment, I found like an equal and opposite reaction to explore the other half. And that was Gertie to me. Like, what is the most absolute pure essence of just goodness and love and loyalty, unquestioned, unconditional? So the deeper I got in the deployments, the deeper I got in that change that was occurring within me, she was like the anchor for me. That was the thing that cut through both those worlds. That primeval world I was living in, the civilized world I no longer knew how to deal with. And she, this 13-pound Shih Tzu, who had eyes looking in two different directions and extremely crooked teeth, she was like a goddess to me. Like she led me through this thing. And she passed after my last tour, which was absolutely gut-wrenching. But like to this day, I still feel it as if she's still here. That's the power that these dogs can have over us.
Totally. I mean, when I got sober, one of the first things I did was get a dog. And this guy who was helping me get sober goes, well, I don't know if you're in the headspace for that, but, maybe he'll help you. And I'll tell you what, man, like that dog, it gave me a mission and it gave me something to focus on other than myself. It was like, I can't drink again because I got to take care of this dog. And that like gave me a focus that sort of put me on the right track. And I mean, that dog literally saved my life.
Did you grow up with dogs, or was that your first introduction?
That was my second dog. I grew up with the dog. It's funny because you said your dog was an anchor. I had this dog when I was a kid. He was a fox terrier. And I don't know my dad, who's never been around, but my mom would travel about a third of the year for work. So I had this like rotating cast of nannies as a kid. I'd have a new nanny like every year or two. So I was always having to figure out how to adapt to all these different people. But I had this dog, and that was the thing that was always in the house, right? So that dog was sort of like the anchor for me. Like, this thing's always going to be here. And so we got pretty tight too.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
I feel like dogs, for people in the military who've seen combat and come back and have any sort of struggle, I feel like there's a lot of things that help, but I feel like dogs are kind of a common theme.
Yeah. And what's nice too is when you have a dog over there, the military working dogs, they're like super dogs. They're like Nietzsche's Overman, but in dog form. But it's still nice. Like, they're still therapeutic, even though they could rip you to shreds in a fraction of a second. They're just, to have that like simple little four-legged being there that no matter what happens, no matter how bad the firefight, no matter how boring the winter happens to be, they're just ready to go. They're bright-eyed. Like, I could look at their eyes and say, all right, what am I being weak about? Let's go work out. This dog's ready to go. It's like the perpetual motion machine, the perpetual happiness machine. They're just like the ultimate consistent reminder, hey, don't be a loser. Like, hey, be a better human being at all times. It's the best thing in the world.
Why do you think that is, that they give us this reminder to be a better human being?
I don't think it'd be too far of a stretch to say that there's been coevolution happening. Yeah. And at a deeper level than like science has been able to put into words yet. Like, if you think about it, we domesticated dogs before we domesticated wheat and figs and grapes. 20,000 years ago or more. That's as far as we know. It could even be longer back. Yeah. Agriculture is 10,000 years. So what does that mean? That's like 400, 500 human generations. 500 human generations. We can't even remember 4 generations ago. So if we've been living with dogs for 500 generations, we got to think about what is the impact there. Now, when I point my finger, Carson knows what that means. If I point my elbow, he doesn't know what that means. So there's something there going on, but that's like merely physical. There's the existential component as well. And I wrote a piece about this, and like the theory was that you have this world we live in, this civilized world, and it's built on maximalization. It's built on speed. It's built on hustle. It's built on grind. Get some, have a goal, execute, go check box to check box. The dog doesn't give a shit about any of that.
Yeah.
The dog is pure minimalism. The dog is here. It's slow. It's quality. It's depth. And that dog, I framed it as the dog is literally a bridge to what it means to be an ancient human being. Because while we're living in this world surrounded by all this incredible stuff and not so incredible stuff, that mutt with fur and blood and love is literally right there. And we look at it and we remember 20,000 years ago. It cuts through all of it. Immediate reframing of everything. So they bring us back to the era of minimalism if we choose to listen to them. It all comes back down to the choice. And you look at the dog and it's like, hey, at all times, the dog's looking at me saying, Carson looks at me and says, you have a choice. Now, you either learn my lesson or you don't. It's on you. It comes back on you at the end of the day. And that's one of the beautiful offerings of the dog.
Totally. And dogs aren't going to change their behavior, whether it's 10,000 years ago and we're setting up a camp and starting to grow food, or it's right now and we're in a big house and we're ordering Uber Eats. It's all the same. Whereas as technology has progressed, we've sort of been, there's more, faster, stronger all the time. And the dog is just psyched to be there no matter what's going on, no matter who you are, no matter what you look like.
Yeah. It makes me think about the evolution we're going through right now, which is incomparable. The evolution we're going to go through in the next 5 years is probably greater than what we went through in the past 20,000 years.
With AI.
So like to me, the dog is going to be even more important in the next 5 years than it was for 25,000 years. Like even looking at like the movement of like transhumanism, which is trying to merge the human with the AI, with the cloud. Like, why do we even need these bodies anymore when we can upload ourselves and live forever in a silicon world? I don't really want that. You know, if we can't have the dog by our side, are we still human?
Yeah.
There's an argument to be made we're not anymore. We're something completely different. So as long as we choose to have a dog in our life, there's something innately human about this non-human animal. And trying to weigh what those two different worlds and ways of being are going to be like in our lifetime, we're going to have to answer that question.
On What Then, your Substack, you've written a lot about dogs. What even prompted that in the first place?
The big thinking I like to do is between the worlds, the primeval to civilized, trying to bring the best of the primeval here. And part of that was the dog. So like it almost seems like it doesn't really fit that, but it almost is at the core of it. And there's a tendency with myself, and I think a lot of writers as well, to get lost in the world of abstraction, lost in the world of idea, and eventually forget why you're writing in the first place.
Yeah.
And if your writing is not grounded in the concrete, the daily, and making you a more aware and grounded human being, what's the point? And I easily get lost in an idea. Like I'll devote everything to an idea, and I'll forget that I'm here. I'll forget to train. I'll forget everything. And Carson doesn't let that happen. Like I gotta be here. So it's almost a spiritual practice to write about the dog. Even before I started writing What Then, I would journal just one thing every day I was grateful for about Carson. And that immediately cut through drama at work, stress, worry, concern, fear, doubt, literally grounded me in the moment, just as a spiritual practice to write 200 words on the dog. Mm-hmm. And when I was doing What Then, I'm like, all right, I can't just write about this hardcore stuff, these hardcore thoughts, and trying to figure out how to live more optimally. And then what better way to ground that than with a couple dog essays every few months. And that was the cause.
That's awesome. You had one where you talked about how, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on the numbers here, but Napoleon, through his campaigns, managed to kill about 6 million people total, which is like 0.5% of the world. So this guy is just ruthless, does not give a damn. And then after a battle, he sees this dog and it changes something about him. So tell us about that.
Yeah. He murdered so many people. His battles led to the murder of so many people and the death of so many people, combatants, women, children, non-combatant males, elderly, young. Like the mind can't even compute 6 million. You can't see 6 million. That's a football stadium is what, 80,000. So 6 million people died. And he was remarkably cold about that fact. He's like, I actually didn't feel anything about that. I could watch 10,000 of my men die in a matter of a few days. It's a course of business. I had a mission to attend to. And then one day during his Italian campaign, he was just, I can almost see him like sitting there in his tent, looking out at the battlefield, literally thousands of corpses of his own men, of his enemy, the dead and the dying. And then he saw a dog sitting next to one of the dead men, one of his dead men. And the dog was howling. And he literally sat down and wrote down in his journal, he had sent thousands of men to their deaths with no problem whatsoever. And then all of a sudden, he has this emotional rupture, not because of the dead men, but because of the dog. Because all these people were back at camp, eating, trying to go home, thinking about themselves. Who was out there suffering with the dead? It was a dog who loved her master, who is now dead. And it kind of like woke him up a little bit. It obviously didn't change his behavior. He kept doing what he was doing. But for him to stop what he was doing and have that emotion, that dog tapped into something human in him. Like the dog gave him a reminder of the human condition in an almost inhuman being. And it's pretty remarkable. And I tried to compare like the two forms of logic. You have the logic of the dog and the logic of the human. And to universalize that, we all have a little Napoleon in us. We're all human. We all want to keep achieving. We all want the fame, the status to a certain degree, the wealth to a certain degree, to achieve the mission, whatever the mission is. But the dog, again, doesn't give a damn. To the dog, that's all a fiction. To the dog, what matters is being there for the person you love. And that's what that dog in the field was doing, is she was there for the one human being that she loved. Nothing else mattered. Not taking over the world, not becoming a monarchy. It was a human thing. And it was a really poignant moment.
Totally. And I think a way, at least I experience this, is I will be, driving around Las Vegas, and I might see a person who's homeless or whatever. And, my initial thing is like, do we want to get too close? But then they'll have a dog with them. And the dog doesn't care about the person's condition or situation. The dog is just there. They're just like clung onto that person. They're ready to go. And it gives me like this moment to sort of reframe things and see things in a more human way, that we're all kind of on this big spinning rock in the cosmic abyss. And, at the end of the day, everyone just like wants to be loved, wants to have something that's devoted to them. And we often forget that, but it takes like a dog to bring me back to that, Yeah.
There's a whole world there that's worth thinking on. And again, why that's the case, whether it's the coevolution, but it almost doesn't even matter, because if that dog can be enough to humanize all of us and just be that reminder throughout the day that, I wish I could remember. I just read a great quote about, I think it was, I was reading the journals of Ernst Jünger, I think, and he said something to the effect of, what if before we're born, we had the opportunity, we actually chose our role in life. So the role that Michael Easter is living right now, exactly as it was, your whole history, all the good, all the bad, the role Sam Alaimo chose, we actually chose that out of a selection before we were born. And that adds like a level of autonomy and a reminder of choice to our lives at the moment. That strikes me as something like the dog. Like it almost doesn't, it's almost like Nietzsche's eternal recurrence. Like the dog reminds you that this moment, no matter what it is, you can wish it to be the same forever if you're reminded to make of this moment everything you want it to be. So it's like a roving philosophical reminder, the dog. Maybe that's what it is when you see the homeless man with a dog.
How do you feel like dogs help you be more present? You've written about that. I feel like everyone's like, to your point about ambition, and schedules are more scheduled than ever. It's always like, got to be doing something, got to be working 5, 10, 20 steps ahead. But the dogs somehow pull us back into right now.
I wrote a different piece on zoomies, and watching over time how the zoomies end up declining with age. It's super depressing, but that's the awareness. That's the moment it brings you back to. And I'm a super big fan of Tolkien. I read The Lord of the Rings every year since I was 14. Same year I wanted to be a SEAL. Awesome. Every single year. And the perspective of the elves is that a Middle-earth elf is immortal. And very early on in the creation of Middle-earth, they made an alliance with men. And I remember Tolkien in The Silmarillion talking about the first meeting of elves and men. And they met each other, they loved each other, they respected each other. And then the men got older and died, and the elves were just mourning. They're like, why is he gray haired and wrinkled and I look like I'm 22? Like, what is this curse? And it reminds me of the dog. We're the elves. The dogs are the humans because they live so much less than us. So in a lifetime, you could have 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different series of dogs. And every single time they come and go, every single time they get a lot of zoomies as a puppy and then no zoomies when they die. It is literally a reminder of what is the most important thing in the world every single day.
Yeah.
And they literally, he makes me slow down, makes me stop what I'm doing, the stress, the phone, the Slack, the internet, the email, the writing, the thinking, and just stop, literally pet them, play with them for 2 minutes. And then they teach you the value of 5 minutes, because 5 minutes every day adds up to a long time in 10 years of a dog.
Yeah.
And that's sort of the macro existential perspective that I try to keep every day.
When I read that piece, it reminded me, so I have a dog right now who's 6 months old. His name's Duke. And he's a German short hair. You know, he's bred to hunt. He needs a mission. And oftentimes his mission is, for example, pulling my computer monitor off of my desk, which was a 32-inch monitor, shattering it into various pieces while also putting a gigantic dent in the wood floor. And at first I'm just like, oh my God, what have you done? But then it's like, one day this dog is not going to be pulling down computer monitors. And you know what? I'm probably going to miss that. Yeah. And so it reminds you to just be like, just enjoy the dog's personality now, because even though, yeah, he pulls down some computer monitors, it's like he also does all these other hilarious puppy things that are just amazing. And I'm going to miss him one day.
And the spontaneity is good too. Like if everything in life went perfectly well, life would be so boring we probably couldn't even take it. So to have a puppy busting a computer screen and like making you stop whatever it is you're doing in your day to clean it up, there's something magical in that too.
Totally. So when Carson got sick, you can tell us what happened. I can't remember the specific details, but you had to take him to the ER overnight. What did you learn from that?
I still don't know what to call it. I forget what the name was. So when he gets anesthesia and gets put under, it collapsed his whole stomach lining, his whole intestinal tract. Jeez. So we didn't know that. We're bringing him home. And then within a few hours, he starts crying and whimpering. And he doesn't do that. Like he doesn't, even when he's in pain, he doesn't cry that much. And it was like literally a heart-tugging noise. And it was on the weekend after the surgery. So the vet clinic was closed. And then we drove him to the ER. It was literally a raining day. He was in the back seat. We both felt like we wanted to throw up. We felt so bad for him. He can't put words to it. It doesn't make any sense to him. He's suffering. I would gladly take that suffering for him. And we get him there. And luckily they found out what it was, gave him the medicine, got his stomach back on track. Now he just needs a shot before he gets put under. But like I genuinely believe that the philosopher Epictetus was actually a dog in human's clothing. Like if a dog could speak, it would be Epictetus. And he's one of my favorite thinkers. And just kind of like brutal, blunt voice, bringing you immediately back down to the present moment, immediately to what is within your control and what is not within your control. Forget about what's not, maximize what is. That's the dog. And I tried to, when I got back from that trip, I was in the middle of studying Epictetus, and a specific quote he had sounds super morbid, and it kind of is, but it's like, what harm is there if you whisper to yourself at the moment you're kissing your child to say, tomorrow you'll die? And that is a classic Epictetus Stoic exercise. It's not meant to be morbid. And I tried to explore what that meant through Carson. It doesn't mean don't care about it since you can't control their life. It doesn't mean pull back and become emotionally numb. I think it means the opposite. I think it means use this reminder of mortality as a deliberate practice on a daily basis to reframe your treatment of and your relationship with the people in your life. And Carson having that near-death experience, which like ripped this in two, is a verification of that quote and what it means to say tomorrow you'll die. Is to stop everything right now. Appreciate not just the dog. And that's the dog's gift to us with their mortality is to remember to treat humans in our lives the same way, with the same patience, because they too will die. And so will we. And I tried to frame that with that quote. And I'm pretty sure that's probably what Epictetus meant. We'll never know, but it's probably as good a definition as any.
Yeah. It's interesting because when you talk about that, pondering your own death or the death of others, like everything's going to go. A lot of people, to your point, they do find that morbid, but I wrote about this a little bit in The Comfort Crisis. I traveled to Bhutan to write about the topic because they have a very different relationship with death and contemplating it than we do. But when I was doing research for that section, that chapter of the book, I came across this study. I think it was conducted at Stanford. Don't quote me. But they had these groups of people think about their own death. And their response was, in the short term, that was very uncomfortable. I did not like that at all. But when they tracked them in the long term, they ended up reporting higher levels of happiness because it had changed their behavior in such a way that they realized, oh, this ride is going to end eventually. And I have a choice of how I can ride it. I can enjoy this ride. I can slow down, savor the things I really love and get meaning from, or not, more or less. So I do think there is some good, and I'm not one of those people that thinks we need a study behind everything to think an idea is valid. Not at all. But I do think it, sort of adds some scientific backing, especially for the non-believers.
Yeah, that's the striking thing about we've been talking about the philosophy of the dog, Epictetus, the human dog. But to your point, people have been thinking about this for a long time. And one of my favorite thinkers is Irvin D. Yalom. He was an existential psychotherapist. So he took existentialism, which is like a world of double talk and out there, what are you talking about? But applied it to psychotherapy. So he grounded it in the concrete world. And he actually practiced. So to your point, he used his actual case studies, his actual patients to write this book and explore what existentialism meant. And he riffed a lot on cancer patients, car accident survivors, you name it, and articulated their monologue, their inner monologue before the incident and then after the incident, and how just that brush of death changed everything. They quit the job they hated. They ended the relationship that was toxic. They stopped and literally just looked at a flower. Whereas before it's, hey, I got to get to my car. I have to get to work. I have to get this done. I have to go to the store. I have to come home. No, stop. Literally make a trip dedicated to just go look at a flower or a butterfly at the park. And it's remarkable how much of a difference that can make. And again, that cuts through what we think is normal in this world we've constructed, which is a beautiful thing with a lot of exceptional attributes. But that reminder of mortality is a way to maximize it so that you can still enjoy all the fruits of your labor and get after life with as much passion as you want, which I love doing. I love the speed, but at the cost of the slowness and of the appreciation of the gratitude, it almost isn't worth it at that point. So it becomes an art of balancing the two. That's the dog.
Yeah, exactly. You don't necessarily need the brush with death, the car accident, the cancer, the tour in Afghanistan. If you've got a dog, that's a reminder right there every single day.
Yeah, it's practice. It's a discipline.
All right, man. Well, I appreciate you coming on. Give Carson a pat for all of us.
Rock on. I appreciate the time. Appreciate the conversation. Thank you.
Now we are going to speak with Dr. Nancy G. She is the director for the Center for Human-Animal Interaction at Virginia Commonwealth University, and she studies how dogs can improve physical health and mental health. So we're going to dive into all of the scientific details about why dog ownership can be really, really good for you. Here's Nancy. Dr. Nancy G., welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
Here's where I want to start. In your Google Scholar profile, you have yourself, your photo is with a dog, which I absolutely loved because I feel like most academics, their Google Scholar profile would be them in a white lab coat or in a lab or something, but you're with your dog. So what kind of dog or dogs, maybe you have multiple dogs, do you have?
I have two dogs right now, and they are both miniature poodles. I have had border collies and a wide range of other breeds. But the program I run, we have 66 therapy dogs in the program, and they're all different dog breeds, from golden retrievers, down to Maltipoos. So every breed size you can imagine.
Amazing. Is there a certain type of breed that tends to do well as a therapy dog?
It's a great question, and it all boils down to the dog's temperament. So within any given breed, you can have a range of temperaments. But generally speaking, kind of the stereotypical therapy dog is going to be that golden retriever, golden doodle, Labrador, because generally speaking, these dogs tend to be affiliative. And what that means is that they like to visit with strangers.
Yeah.
Not all dogs really want to go up and have a stranger touch them. And that's what it boils down to. Any dog can do this. We've had Dobermans and pit bulls, and, breeds that are stereotypically considered, a little more fearful. They're fear producing. But the reality is those dogs, many of them really do love to just interact with people and have people pet them. And that's a unique quality when you think about it. I mean, not very many people want to go up to complete strangers and interact with them. And so it is kind of a unique quality, and it isn't really breed specific.
I love that. How did you start pairing psychiatry with dogs?
So it kind of goes back a long time. So I'm a researcher by training. And years ago, I was doing dog sports. And it's kind of a long story, but a couple of my friends said, hey, we're doing a therapy dog evaluation. Your dogs would be great. Why don't you bring your dogs and get them evaluated? So I did, and they passed, and now I have these 2 registered therapy dogs. What am I going to do? Yeah. So I started visiting with them, a wide variety of different populations, and I was seeing these kind of amazing effects. I mean, really kind of chilling in that, people get very emotional when they see some of these interactions. And so as the scientist, I was thinking, well, that's anecdotal. How much of that is real? And so I started doing research. I started doing experiments. And I've been finding out over the course of about 25 years that dogs really do make a difference in a variety of ways in the lives of humans.
That's so interesting that it started with this observation, then a little bit of skepticism, but I have the background to maybe figure out if there's some there. I feel like that's how most great scientific findings start.
Well, that's absolutely true. And that's where I came from, is trying to apply the science to it. And so I was doing randomized trials very early on, and I was getting some neat results, which was really kind of interesting and also affirming in that there is something to this. It isn't just anecdote. And I think it is that science, that body of evidence that legitimizes these kinds of practices. And so we see, for instance, therapy dogs in hospitals. We just completed 3 randomized control trials in a hospital setting. So we were looking at the sort of the most vulnerable populations, and we were looking at people who are vulnerable to the deleterious effects of loneliness. Okay. And those are older adults, those with mental illness, and hospitalized children. And we just completed those studies, and guess what? We found that the dogs actually do improve loneliness among other measures that we included in those studies.
Interesting. What did the people who were participants, the patients, report? Did you talk to them at all, and what were some of the things they found? And I guess how did you measure the improvements as well?
So we used standardized measures to begin with. So we used some reliable and valid measures of loneliness, anxiety, depression, and also mood. And we also collected some physiological measures using essentially a wristwatch that collects a variety of different kind of physiological outcomes. And we also collected saliva from the children so that we could look at cytokines and other measures of stress. So what did the participants say? Well, it's really interesting. When you think about this kind of research, we're upfront with them, right? As part of the informed consent process, we say this is a randomized trial. We've got 3 conditions. One of them includes a dog. The other 2 do not include a dog. And so one of the challenges that we faced is that the people always wanted the dog.
Right.
So the people who are willing to be in this kind of research, they really do want to have the dog present. Yeah. Now, in fairness, they participated anyway. Even if the dog wasn't in their condition, we had very few dropouts. But people really wanted that dog to come visit them while they were in the hospital. These folks were all hospitalized for 5 or more days. So this is where loneliness becomes a real issue in these kind of chronic situations, and it can be so important to intervene while they're in the hospital. If we can reduce their loneliness, what we may see, and we don't know this yet, but what we may see is better adherence to sort of follow-up, better compliance with their ongoing treatment, and perhaps more positive outcomes. Right now, we know that we see these effects in terms of anxiety, depression, loneliness, and mood in particular was altered by the presence of the dog.
What do we know generally about the physical health impacts of dog ownership?
So dog ownership is a little bit different, right? So what we did was an interaction study. So again, this is what I was talking about earlier. These are dogs that go and interact with complete strangers, right? But dog ownership itself is a little bit different. There's some neat research out there that shows that, for instance, dog owners tend to have lower blood pressure, lower risk of cardiovascular disease, improved mood. There's one study about individuals who adopted pets that showed that they reported fewer health complaints after adopting a pet. And there's some really neat research that happened years ago by Erica Friedman. She looked at individuals who had a heart attack. And she was doing research on a wide variety of things. And basically, she gave them a questionnaire, on a whole bunch of things. And one of those questions was, do you own a pet? And then she followed up with them 1 year later. And guess what? The pet owners were more likely to be alive 1 year later than the non-pet owners.
Interesting.
Particularly the dog owners. And so here's the problem with pet ownership research. People want to pick their own pets. And, researchers want to assign people to conditions, right? So we get a selection bias in a lot of pet ownership research. Now, there are some studies out there where people have been assigned to either own a pet or not, but they tend to be small samples and they tend to use quite unique populations. For example, there was a study done in Korea where they assigned people to care for crickets. So they became cricket owners. Nice. And over an 8-week period of time, they found out that depression scores were decreased. And there were some other neat improvements over just adopting and caring for crickets.
Wow.
So we do think that pet ownership can be beneficial. But here's the fundamental question. Do healthy people choose to own pets?
Right.
Or do pets make people healthy? That's the part that's really hard to tease out.
Does the study on the people who had heart attacks, does that seem to suggest that there's some there more or less? Because we're starting fundamentally with a population that's unhealthy.
It's a great question. And so a lot more research has been done since then.
Yeah.
And the American Heart Association actually issued a statement evaluating all of the existing research and basically saying that pet ownership, particularly dog ownership, is associated with and probably causally associated with a reduced risk of cardiovascular disease. Adding that word causal in there, that's a big deal.
That's a big deal.
For that kind of thing to be issued from the American Heart Association. And so there is some evidence to indicate that dog ownership, particularly dog ownership, is beneficial for cardiovascular health. We don't know what that's due to. Is it because dog owners are more likely to take their dogs for walks?
Yeah.
And we know that walking is good for you? Is it that we need to care for another living being? A dog, they force you to feed them. They say, hey, it's time for food. It's time for me to go out. They force you to get up. In fact, I did a study with some great researchers up in Scotland, and we looked at older adults who had dogs. They experienced fewer sedentary events during the day. Mm. And sitting is kind of the new smoking, right? Sitting is not good for us. We need to get up and move around. They also walked more and they walked faster. And so there is some evidence that having a dog can be a very healthy choice.
Well, it's interesting because my mom she's now, I don't know if she may disown me for giving her age, but I'll just say she's in her late 70s. That way we won't put a firm number on it. She got a dog maybe 5 years ago. And one, it made her far more active. Her step counts easily doubled. 2, it gave her a routine. So she was kind of winding down into retirement. So as she had this job that was somewhat high pressure her entire life, that goes away. But now she has a dog that, to your point about routines, I got to feed it, I got to take it for walks, I got to go get it to go to a bath. This routine gets inserted that keeps her active, but also gives her, I guess I would use a sort of sense of purpose. And then to layer on top of that, she's met so many new people through that dog. She's got a doodle. She goes to doodle meetups in Las Vegas. One of her current best friends is someone she met through the dog.
Yeah, dogs are kind of the great leveler. You're willing to risk interacting with somebody you don't know just because they have a dog.
Right.
And you see people doing this all the time. They'll pull out their phone and, I've got a doodle too. And they start showing you a photo on their phone of their dog. And we start having these interactions. And, so we've done some research on older adults and pet ownership. And one of the things that we see is as people age, pet ownership drops off. And so that is a little bit problematic. But for those older adults who do retain their pets, we also see a greater retention of cognition and physical functioning. And so that's kind of an important finding. If you can support older adults to maintain their pets as they age, it seems to be really good for them in terms of cognition and physical function.
How important is I believe in one of your studies, you might have used the word motivation. Just in the sense that sometimes when people retire, I feel like you read reports where, they might have worked, they sort of had purpose and motivation every day. And then that sometimes can kind of disappear. It's like the first couple weeks of retirement, you're like, this is great. I don't have to do anything. But then after that, you go, oh, I don't have to do anything. How important are dogs for that? And how does that play out?
It can be very important. And so we've talked about it as being kind of a raison d'etre, right? A reason for living. And with, for instance, older adults, when one of the couple passes away, the other one, if they have a pet, they experience a shortened grieving process. And so there is something to be said for the pet helping them to recover from that grieving process. We're also very much aware that older adults or individuals who are considering suicide will say, I won't do that because I have to be there to take care of the dog. And so that can also be very impactful. The fact that they will not commit suicide because they have to take care of the dog. If you can get them through that period, that's amazing and incredibly beneficial. Now, we also have to consider that pets are not a panacea, though. There are downsides to pet ownership, too. For instance, pets don't live as long as we do.
Right.
And so losing a pet can be very emotionally impactful. Or caring for a sick pet can be very challenging as well, particularly if you know that things aren't ultimately going to go well with whatever disease that pet is dealing with.
Right.
And for older adults, we have to also be concerned about risks of falling. Now, here's where it gets a little bit tricky, because older adults who walk their dogs and who get out there and do things with their dogs have a lower risk of falling. However, we do have to be concerned about older adults in the home perhaps tripping over a pet and falling.
Yeah, or having a 120-pound dog who likes to pull on the leash when it's someone who is 80 and weighs 130 pounds or something.
And it can pull their arm out of the socket or feel that way. Yeah, that can be very challenging.
Yeah. What do we know about dog ownership or interventions on dogs and mental health?
So actually, we've written an entire book on this. It's published by the American Psychiatric Association. It's a wonderful book. And what we did is we paired researchers in human-animal interaction with psychiatrists. And each of the chapters in this book are really about various aspects of the ways in which animals, most often dogs, but not always, can be involved in the treatment of mental illness. But the reality is there's some great evidence out there to indicate that involving a dog in the treatment of mental illness can be beneficial. Other species are also involved. So for instance, there's equine therapy. Other kinds of animals have been used in classrooms in a variety of settings to help with that issue of motivation. I used to work with preschool kids, and I'll tell you what, preschool kids become highly motivated when there's a dog in the room. Yeah. And they are very willing to raise their hand and practice turn taking and follow the rules and listen to instructions when there's a dog present. And so there is something kind of special and unique about having a dog in these various situations to kind of move things along, to sort of provide social lubrication if you want to get somebody to open up and talk more. Oftentimes with kids, they're more willing to talk to a dog than to their therapist. So the therapist could perhaps, say, would you mind telling the dog what's going on? And they will. And this was sort of discovered years and years ago, how just bringing a dog into a therapeutic situation can help a client to relax and, assuming, of course, that they like dogs, help them to relax and open up. And so there is something very sort of impactful about having that kind of key, if you will, to sort of getting them to open up and participate. By the way, they'll show up on time. Kids who are in school programs, they'll go wake their parents up. Hey, we can't be late to school today because I know there's a dog there,
What do we think is going on? Why does this happen with dogs in particular? And does it play out for cats, too? I know the cat people are going, oh, Michael, you always just harp on how much you love dogs. You never talk about cats. So what's up with cats as well?
So let me answer the first question first. What's going on? Why is this happening? Well, there's a number of proposed reasons for why it's happening. One is simple biophilia, and that means that we are drawn to nature and natural things. And so that's a possibility. Another one is that dogs may help us to reduce our stress. And so if that's true, for example, we've seen decreases in blood pressure and cortisol and increases in oxytocin, that kind of bonding feel-good hormone. If that's what's happening, then that frees us up to use our cognitive resources for other things. So for instance, dogs may be beneficial for things like test anxiety. Because if the dog can help that person to relax, then what can happen is that frees up all that thinking. They don't have to worry about, oh, I'm going to do terrible on this test.
Yeah.
Instead, they can actually start thinking about the questions on the test and perform well. So it could be stress reduction. It could be attachment, particularly for our own dogs. That the power of attachment can be very important. We need attachment figures in our lives, and dogs can meet sort of the requirements for an attachment figure. So particularly for older adults whose social networks are decreasing, it may be beneficial to have that dog as sort of an intermediate attachment figure. And then you see that you start meeting other people through dog ownership, and it can help to rebuild those social circles a little bit.
Yeah.
So there's lots of potential reasons for why it's happening.
I feel like, especially with, I guess what you would call weak ties, people who you just kind of see in your neighborhood, you have small conversations with them, but it's not like you're, seeing them on the weekends, going to dinner. I feel like dogs especially help with that. I mentioned we have the German Shorthair Pointer, and there's another couple in our neighborhood that also has a German Shorthair Pointer. So whenever we see them, we're going to stop and talk to them for 5 to 10 minutes. This happens maybe once a week, but it's like these small little moments with other people. I feel like those get overlooked, but they often really count for our emotional health, our mental health, and all these different things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. What you're talking about is social capital. And so walking in the neighborhood, people don't necessarily know my name, but they might know my dog's name.
Yeah.
And they might come over to chat with me just to talk about the dog. And there are other, poodle owners in the neighborhood. And likewise, we stop and chat and let the dogs interact. But it can build from there. So for instance, your neighbors might say, hey, we're going to go out of town. Would you mind watching our dogs while we're out of town?
Yeah.
And so you start to build greater connections with people in your neighborhood. The other thing that happens in neighborhoods where people walk their dogs is the dogs provide kind of an informal surveillance in the neighborhood, and the neighborhood is perceived as safer. And so it draws people out. More people will communicate with one another. So it really can kind of help to build those ties that may build into something more. Or it could be at the level of, hey, here comes Allie's mom, right? And we chat about Allie for a while. And that's okay. But the point is, it is helping people to connect.
Yeah.
And going back really quick to your question about cats versus dogs. So first of all, with cats, there's just less research. We have far more research. In fact, the lion's share of research in this area involves dogs. And there's lots of reasons for that, but not least of which a dog is highly trainable and is willing to go into hospital environments. And, zoonotic disease transmission is very well understood in dogs. So we can safely take them into hospital situations because we can prevent kind of the zoonotic disease transmission through some simple behaviors. But with cats, some of the research does not bear out with cats as it does with dogs. So for instance, the pet ownership research that I was talking about before, we see some really nice decreases in blood pressure and cortisol and some of that thing. That doesn't necessarily bear itself out with cats, particularly in that study that I mentioned that Erica Friedman conducted, where she looked to see if people were alive a year later. That was true for dog owners, but it wasn't true for cat owners. And so what I would have to say is we can't draw conclusions.
Yeah.
There's just not enough evidence. We need more research with cats, and we need bigger studies with cats in order to be able to draw some real conclusions. Right now, we've got some very solid evidence with dogs and a little bit of evidence with cats.
Okay, that makes sense. I think one thing that's interesting too is that all of this communication, the relationship that you have with the dog is totally nonverbal, right?
Yep.
You can tell them sit, stay, whatever, but they're not going to talk back. And it's really interesting, though, how you can still communicate with your dog and they can communicate with you. It's like my dog will tell me what he wants to do. And I just think that's fascinating that we're not speaking to each other, but we kind of know what's going on with each other.
If you think about kind of the process of domestication and selection of dogs from their ancestors, which are predominantly gray wolves, and the wide variety of breeds that we have from that. But if you think about that process, what's happened is that dogs have become highly adept at reading our social cues. They're also pretty good at telling time. So they have ideas about when it's time to go to bed or, when it's time to go for a walk. And if you say those words, I kind of glance to the side because my dog's here and I just said that word that we normally spell, by the way. they do pick up on some of those words. And some dogs do have a pretty good vocabulary in terms of picking up on words that you say. But you're absolutely right. The dogs do not speak English. They don't come back to us and say, Mom, I would like to go for a walk. Right there, that's not what they do. But yet they do communicate pretty clearly what their needs are. For instance, with my dogs, I put sleigh bells on the doors. So when they have to go out, they go ring the bell. Yeah. And, you know, like a good maid or butler, I go running over and open the door to take them out.
Yeah, we do the same. And it's funny what you say about time. We had a German short hair who, you can tell a theme, we love short hairs, who passed away. But this dog knew what time it was all the time. It would be right as the clock hit 5. He'd perk up like it was dinner time. Same at 7 a.m. It was just hilarious. It would drive us nuts, but it was just such a lovable trait he had.
Well, you know, and their senses are so different from our own. So, you know, for instance, when my partner comes home, the sound of the car, the sound of the door, I think the dogs hear that, right? They hear the sound. They can smell things beyond what we can smell. Our noses are virtually useless compared to what they can smell. And so they have their ability to sense, I think, really helps them to appear to have a far better understanding of the situation, largely because, like, oh, here comes Mom. And they know, right? They can tell.
Yeah, I'm sure with my dog, it was, okay, he stopped working about an hour ago. He did this, he did this. Oh, dinner usually happens sometime in this arena, whatever it might be.
And what clothes you put on. Yeah. You know, if you put on the work suit, right, then the dog knows, oh, they're going to work. And they behave differently than if you put on the clothes to go outside for a walk or to hang out on a Saturday. They do pick up on these cues.
Yeah. Are there any studies where dogs have been brought into retirement homes? And
Absolutely.
And what have those found?
So a wide variety of things. But for instance, there's lots of visitation programs to retirement homes. And so they see things like reductions in depression for some older adults, particularly those with memory problems. On the days the therapy dogs are going to be there, those older adults are very good at orienting to time and place. Are the dogs coming today? When will they be here? That can really sort of help them to orient. They're also more verbal. They're more willing to talk and open up. And with some older adults, we start to see issues with regard to calorie consumption. So they begin to lose weight, and so we need them to eat more. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things that they did is they put an aquarium in the dining area at a retirement home. And they found that simply having the aquarium in there got the older adults to consume more calories because they stayed longer and they watched the fish and they ate more food.
Interesting.
And so there's some really neat studies. One study did some things like having the older adults do some basic dog care, brush the dog, put a collar on them. And that's really good for helping them with fine motor skills. Mm-hmm. So a wide variety of different kinds of studies have been done, showing some really neat results of those animal visitation programs. And I should mention that although therapy dogs are the largest number of therapy animals, there are other kinds of therapy animals. There are therapy cats and therapy bunnies and therapy llamas, for instance.
That's great. Who should not get a dog?
A person who doesn't have time.
Yeah.
And a person who does not have the resources to care for the dog. So if you're working 60 hours a week, don't get a dog. These dogs are social animals. They want to be with you. And so if you don't have the time to welcome a family member into your family, then it's not a good time to get a dog. And I think people need to do an honest evaluation of that. You know, am I at a good space to have a dog? Am I going to be able to be there to spend time with these social animals? And do I have the financial resources to take them to the vet and buy them the food and the toys? And all of those sorts of things need to be considered when you're thinking about getting a dog.
Yeah, but if you do have the time and the resources, it seems like a pretty good idea for your health. And what I thought was interesting when we started is that the dogs that you work with, they're all different breeds. So it's not like you have to single out a specific breed. It's like, pick one you want, pick one that seems friendly, and you're good to go.
Do your research. Find out what kind of a dog is going to fit your lifestyle. For instance, if you have a very sedentary lifestyle and you're not going out in the world, or maybe you live in a small apartment, you probably don't want that border collie.
Right.
A border collie wants to run and wants a job and really needs to be active and working with their handler a lot. So maybe what you want to do is get a small dog. There are some great dogs that are sort of considered lap dogs that would be great for an apartment. If you have allergies, you want to think about getting what kind of pet can I have that would suit my allergies? And there's no such thing as a hypoallergenic animal. But the reality is that some of those curly-coated breeds, like poodles, they tend to keep the dander close to the skin rather than releasing it into the environment. So people react less to non-shedding breeds, and particularly curly-coated breeds.
That makes
But
sense.
again, find out, go visit that kind of dog and make sure that your allergies can tolerate them.
When so we're on our second German short hair pointer, and we had a trainer come help us, and we called her before we got him. I said, we're getting a German short hair pointer, and she goes, do you know what you're getting into? We said, yes, we know exactly what we're getting into. We know they're absolutely nuts. They need a mission. They need to be run. They need a lot of exercise, but we love them for that.
Absolutely. And that's true of every dog, right? Finding out what that dog needs and then meeting the dog where they are. For example, I think some people are very well meaning when they meet a dog for the first time and they do that pat the dog on the top of the head. I have yet to meet a dog that wants to be patted on the top of the head, right? They love to be scratched behind the ears. And the point is, find out what the dog likes. What makes that dog happy and excited, and do that with your dog a lot. And what's neat about it is that makes us feel good. Yeah. We feel really good inside when we do things that make our dog feel good, which is kind of neat.
I love that. All right, final question, and this one's kind of a strange one. We're going to flip the tables a little bit. Let's say the dog is the psychiatrist. What do you think dogs would prescribe to humans to be well?
Live in the moment. Live in the moment. This is such a good lesson from dogs. They live in the here and now. And so much of what troubles humans is worrying about things that are not in the here and the now, or aren't as pressing in the moment. And if we can live in the moment, if we can take time to smell the flowers, we don't necessarily have to smell other dogs' behinds, right? Like a dog would. But the point is, if we enjoy those sensory experiences and really live in the moment, I think that would be a dog's advice to us.
I love it. Well, Nancy, thanks so much for joining us. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been a lot of fun.
Welcome back. We're going to end the show, but before we do, I got some final words about dogs and keeping them healthy this summer. Summer is heating up. Turns out the dogs are not as able to cool themselves as us humans are. So humans are actually really unique as species because we're so good at cooling ourselves. This is because we are not covered in fur. We also stand upright so the sun doesn't hit us as intensely. And we also sweat. Now, dogs, they have none of this. They're covered in fur, which is insulating, and they also don't sweat. They have to cool themselves by panting, not to mention they are down horizontally on the ground, so they get hit with a lot more sunlight. So I want you to think of it like this. Their situation in the heat would be like if you were to cover yourself in antiperspirant and put on a winter coat and then just sort of crawl around the ground. You get really hot on a hot day. So dogs can overheat at temperatures that are surprisingly not that hot for us. 90 degrees, 80 degrees, those can be really hot and dangerous temperatures for dogs. So what does that tell us? What should you do this summer? First and foremost, if you are taking your dog out in the summer and you feel like it's hot, like you're getting a bit overheated, that is definitely happening to your dog. So my main advice for taking dogs out in the summer is to do so early in the morning or after the sun has gone down. That is going to be the number one thing you can do to make sure your dog stays healthy. If you happen to be out and your dog does start to pant excessively or stumble a bit, you want to get that dog immediately in some shade, give them some water, maybe give them some ice chips, just get them out of direct heat and not moving as much. You do those things and you'll be able to keep your best friend healthy all summer. That is all we got for you today. Thank you as always for checking out the show. We're in your feeds twice a week. And if you want to send us a question for our Ask Michael Anything section, we would love that. email it to media@twopct.com or just drop it in the comments. We would love voice memos as questions and also video questions. We would love to run those. We'll answer as many of your questions as we can. Do not forget to subscribe. And as always, have fun, don't die. And I'm going to add one more thing. Love dogs.